to this special edition of AML Conversations. I'm John Byrd with AML's Right Source. Today, we have a particularly compelling conversation that we want to have with several investigative journalists on a new project that has just been identified as Dubai Unlocked. First of all, these journalists work with, in connection with, in collaboration with an organization called the OCCRP. I'm going to have my good friend Kevin Hall explain that in a second, but I also want to introduce Eli Frick Flydell and Antonio Baquero. Both of these were actively involved in the project, led the project on Dubai Unlocked. Kevin Hall, I've fortunately known for decades, who's done amazing investigative work, and he was kind enough to give his colleagues today to be involved. So, Kevin, give us a brief description of the organization. I know that it's been around for a number of years, and you folks do excellent work, but if you wouldn't mind describing both your mission and the organization.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity to do just that. We like to brag that the Organized Crime and Corruption Project, reporting project, OCCRP, we're the largest newsroom most Americans have never heard of. But we've got more than 200 people around the world between us and member centers. We are very actively involved in a narrowly focused space, which is corruption and crime, which actually is not so narrow. It's organized crime and corruption are pretty broad topics, but we have editors on all 6 continents. Antonio, who's joining us today, is our European editor. We work closely, we collaborate with major newsrooms around the world, including E24, which is Eilif's an organization. And what we try to do is do a very, very deep dive. So we don't care about the daily news. We watch it, obviously, but we do, months-long, sometimes years-long investigations into very complex subjects. We get the actual documents, and in this case, we're working with property documents in Dubai.
And we know in the past, we've seen the Pandora Papers, the Paradise Papers, the FinCEN files, all those sorts of things would never have come to light if it wasn't for investigative journalists like yourselves. So we in the AML broad-based community do appreciate that, because it's always so important for us to have a better sense of where there is lack of transparency, where there are gaps in oversight. And I think that from my perspective, the Dubai Unlocked project, to the extent of things that I've already looked at, makes it very, very clear that there's a lot of major issues, to say the least. So I'd like to start off and ask Eli and Antonio to just describe for us the premise of Dubai Unlocked. I mean, obviously, it is to sort of knock on the doors of what's happening in that place in terms of real estate issues. And as I've read some of the descriptions, oligarchs and drug dealers getting access to things that obviously are impactful on all of the illicit finance movement. But Eli, give us your sense of what it is, what you were trying to accomplish, and I'll ask Antonio to weigh in as well.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. So Dubai Unlocked is about looking into Dubai property records that are leaked out of Dubai from multiple leaks, totaling more than 100 data sets, and mostly from the Dubai Land Department and also publicly owned utility companies. And the investigation has 74 members from 58 countries, looking into the real estate documents, verifying the names and the properties that are in these documents that we have obtained from C4ADS, an American NGO researching conflict and war and defense around the world. And the key here is collaboration across a lot of countries and looking at, first of all, people wanted or sanctioned by the international community or on the run from their national law enforcement organizations who've taken up hiding or have settled in Dubai. It's one of the things we're looking for. We're also looking for fortunes, wealth, unexplained wealth that has left Europe and the United States and Pakistan and other countries, where people have seemingly invested those money in Dubai real estate unhindered by the local government. So this is one of the two things we've been looking for, especially.
Antonio, how about yourself? What other things can you add to the rationale for the project to begin with, and what are some of the other goals that, besides the obvious, identifying these issues?
Well, I think that it is like this project can be considered like the Panama Papers of the real estate. So, for example, it is known that if you want to stash money in a numbered account, you go to Switzerland. If you go to create a shell company who owns another shell company, you go to Panama or to other offshore territories. But if you want to launder your money in real estate, Dubai is your place. And that was not something we have discovered with this project. That was no. But sometimes it's not enough to know things. You need to show it. And with these projects, we've been able for first time to show the massive scope of how criminals and corrupt individuals and dodgy characters from all over the world go to Dubai to stash their money in real estate. That is what I mean. We are not discovering that Dubai is a place where these people go. We're not pretending to do that because that was known. But we can tell you, okay, you know that, okay? But now we will show you the scope of the phenomenon. That it is not just one or two or three dodgy individuals going there and buying apartments. That we are talking, I mean, we at OCCRP, we have made an interactive with 200 characters of dodgy individuals. All of them are dodgy individuals. It's not like, and these individuals are only the ones that we were able to verify the identity.
Yeah, it's much longer,
like,
bigger universe.
The list is much longer, but maybe it's not like I find somebody called Kevin Hall there and say, oh, Kevin Hall has an apartment there. No, what we did is we verified that Kevin Hall that has an apartment there is the Kevin Hall that we think he is. So we verify with date of birth, we verify with passport number. So everything has been verified. All properties has been verified. And this gave us a list of 200 people. But there are many more of them.
And it's kind of a good news story, John, and I think your listeners are part of the good news side of the story, right? So you've had this evolution since the Panama Papers and before the Panama Papers offshore leaks. If you look at kind of offshore leaks in the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers and the FinCEN files and the Pandora Papers, and on our side you've had Credit Suisse, you've had the Russian Asset Tracker, you've had a number of the HSBC. So we've had all these on both, whether it's OCCRP or ICIJ or European organizations. You've had all these investigations really since about 2015, and it's led. And then you had the U.S. government with the John Doe activity in Switzerland, trying to force banks to cough up the names of Americans with Swiss bank accounts. So it's been harder and harder and harder to work in this secrecy space. And that's where Dubai is so important in this context. It's now kind of the place of last resort because the Swiss banks are looking at your money. The BVI has gotten better. The Brits have a Commonwealth beneficial ownership registry. The U.S. just launched its. None of these are perfect, but they're better than what was out there. And the burden is now on the federal government to use this data and do something with it, and hopefully to be a little more transparent with it. It's a whole other conversation. But this is a good news story. And by being able to focus on Dubai in the way we did, as Antonio said, this wasn't just saying, Dubai has bad actors. We knew that. But here's how, here's where. And one of the stories we did was OneCoin, the $4 billion fraud, one of the biggest financial frauds. They were able to sell their properties while one of them is presumably dead or certainly missing, and the other, also a fugitive, were able to sell their properties. That shouldn't happen in a world where you've got know your customer and compliance being followed. So it kind of speaks to that. I think
Ilif, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, one remarkable thing, as Kevin says, it's Dubai's kind of last resort in a way. One remarkable thing we have seen is how fugitives and criminals, people even in European, sitting now as we speak in European jails, having bought and sold property while sitting in prison in Europe, how they all listed owners under their own name. So to many of these people, either they consider buying using their own name either a risk worth taking, or they trust it's not going to be leaked, or they need to buy it in their own name to be sure they're the ones controlling this property at any given time. And whatever the reason is, this is one of the striking and very remarkable things about the leak and the content of this leak. It's how many personal details are there? Names of people, passport numbers, date of birth, country, nationality information, maybe in their home address, emails, telephone numbers. So we had a lot of data to work on in order to verify the individuals and the properties in the leak. And it's why one of the reasons we are now looking at more than 160 published articles from the members of the collaboration already at this point of time.
So, Antonio, clearly nobody can say that the data is flawed, the data is incomplete, given what you folks have been able to do. That's clear. And I think that's an important part of this, as Elam just mentioned, right? I mean, the data has, and you said it as well, it's been verified. This is very specific. As Kevin said, we knew Dubai was a place of lax controls, but this makes it very clear the specificity of which you folks have been able to uncover all this information.
Yeah, and which is shocking is the fact that there are so many dodgy individuals in Dubai, and Dubai is not that big,
Right.
that they are forced to interact. So, for example, somebody described Dubai like the Star Wars bar, where all these dodgy characters mix. So basically, we found cases, for example, in one place, and the Australian partner made a story. It's like the Melrose for the Australian gangs. In one building, you have several owners who belong to Australian mafia. And for example, we had another case quite shocking, which is we used geolocation methods. I mean, basically, what we got a TikToker who was the girlfriend of a Bosnian drug dealer, and using geolocation from his TikTok, we were able to locate the.
Antonio froze a little bit there.
I can pick up there for him.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
What Antonio was saying is that we were able to geolocate. Oh, Antonio's back, I think.
Yeah, so we were able to geolocate the exact apartment, and we discovered that that apartment was rented by this Bosnian drug mafiosi to a corrupt individual from Equatorial Guinea. So basically, the dodgy characters, the different type of crimes and dodgy activities, they interact there.
So the other thing I wanted to ask, here in the U.S., we have major gaps in some of our laws and regulations, specifically as it pertains to the real estate industry. We have a proposal out now, 20 years, 5 years, whatever, after 9/11, to finally have the real estate industry do more than they should. But what has Dubai done in response? Maybe not in response to your report, because it just came out. To address money laundering in the real estate sector. And I know from your FAQs on your website, you identify something that our community is well aware of, that FATF actively criticized Dubai or UAE back in March of 2022 for gaps. And so they're making some adjustments. So two-part question. One is, what have they done from your reporting that potentially may improve the ability to identify what you guys have uncovered? But also, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any officials responded to your report. And if they did, what did they say? At least according to what I've read, and I could be wrong, and I apologize if I missed something.
If I can take the first stab at that, and I'll let these guys talk to what the official response was, and it'll come as no surprise that OFAC and Treasury were silent. One of the things that's important is to stay focused on what we know and don't go beyond what we know. And that's what was one of the really frustrating parts of this project, because unlike an offshore leak, like a Panama Papers or a Pandora, we don't have like the transaction documents. So we don't, there's an awful lot we don't know about the enablers. You know, how did the bank transaction, which bank interacted with which bank? So there's several, you can surmise certain things, but it's hard to say anything with certainty because you don't know, you know, is there one law firm, for instance, that really specializes in dodgy actors? The Melrose Place people, if you know, we couldn't get beyond one of the real important questions. Well, they must have used the same law firm. They must have used the same broker. So there are some big gaps in our knowledge, which, you know, happens in these sorts of leaks. You report on what you know and you leave out what you don't know. So with that, I'll hand it over to these guys.
Yeah. So what have they done to make any improvements? And I'm not asking you to comment on the sufficiency of laws or regs, but have there been any changes you've seen during your reporting? Because the reporting's gone on for a couple of years. I know it didn't just happen. And then to Kevin's, it seems to me that there were no specific responses. I saw something that said maybe some folks in the embassies commented, but nobody on the ground. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, that is correct in the way that OCCRP, E24, and ICIJ and all the other partners asked, I think, more than 50 questions in total on specific cases. We had found money that had seemingly ended up in Dubai with no further explanation, money that was lost to citizens of other countries, and where there were criminal investigations and even court cases were finished. And to that, the response of the UAE was fairly short and very specific, and that it was taking the work on fighting for the higher standards and protecting property markets against dirty money, that they took that work very seriously. You know, we're not in position to judge that statement. That's their statement. That's how they either see it or phrase it. But based on the findings, the reaction so far by, for example, Mr. Markus Ferber, who is a German EU parliamentarian from Bavaria, with the Christian Democratic wing of the EU Parliament, and he's saying that given what Dubai Unlocked has now shown and revealed, and what has been published, it's obvious that the FATF must reconsider their findings and ask themselves if they have reviewed all the cases that Dubai Unlocked has found as part of their assessment of whether the UAE should in fact be taken off the grey list, and should in fact not be listed among the countries that really struggle with money laundering in the world.
Right. And, you know, we could probably, I'll go to you in a second, Antonio. We could probably go for days talking about FATF. It's a valuable umbrella, but a lot of times there's holes in that umbrella, is my comment, not yours. Go ahead, Antonio.
No, I mean, what we can say is what we have seen during the reporting. And for example, some months ago, a Swedish partner, the public TV, they went to Dubai, and they made some undercover reporting, and they were offered to buy a property in cash or with crypto, which is something we knew, but now we can show how a real estate agent from one of the biggest real estate companies in Dubai offers you to pay in cash, and tells you that.
Yeah, he's risen up again. I think that same conversation, the agent actually told of selling a property where the person came with bags full of cash.
Wow.
Another clarification, 34 people on U.S. sanctions lists were identified among those 200. I don't know if all of them are on the interactive. We had far more people on the interactive that we didn't put on the interactive than we did. We had more than 400 dodgy people, but we used 200 in the interactive. But the 34 people were subject to sanctions were also there, and we have followed up with OFAC and FinCEN, and crickets again. But I think their position is they just don't want to be a target. I'm confident that they are doing something and are revisiting this, but it's just not something they do in the public light, unfortunately.
Elam, go ahead.
Yeah, so to what Antonio was saying, which is very interesting, the Swedish television team who went undercover. Another thing that the real estate agent said was, if you try and deposit money directly in the banks in UAE, you might get in trouble if you can't explain the origin of the money. But if you buy properties, you'll be asked less questions. And when you sell it, that money is going to be considered coming from the sale of property in Dubai. And the banks will ask fewer or no question at all because the money is already in UAE, which is as close to the definition of money laundering that I think you can get, basically, or at least enabling or facilitating money laundering through property and real estate purchases and selling. If it, just doing the maneuver, the operation itself removes a critical light and hinders questions on the origin of money, it shows how effective it is. The other thing I would like to mention is the leak and also subsequent local data on transaction has been researched by an independent team of academics belonging to the EU Tax Observatory and the Norwegian Center for Tax Research. And they're looking not at cases, they're looking at the larger data, like aggregated data, and researching that data. And they concluded that as much as 43% of the total value of all residential real estate in Dubai is owned by foreigners, foreign nationalities, which is an extremely high percentage. It's higher than, as they know, at least any other jurisdiction in the entire world. So Dubai is really a special place when it comes to the amounts of foreign investments. Also, the SVT story, the Swedish story, they have their case is a man sentenced to jail, currently serving time in jail, convicted of ordering two murders, where in one occasion an innocent 16-year-old boy was killed as a direct consequence. Killed by mistake, though. He wasn't the person supposed to be killed. Anyways, the person ended up in jail, and he is, according to documentation, he is in fact renting out his property and making quite a lot of money while sitting in jail in Sweden. And he is not the only one. And this is one of the new findings in this investigation exclusively that at least I've never seen reported before, at least not on a bigger scale, that there are several cases of people on the run, sanctioned by US and other law enforcement agencies, sanctioned by countries and international organizations, and even then people serving time in jail in other jurisdictions who are actively participating in the Dubai property market. They are buying and selling properties while either inside a prison or on sanction lists and wanted by foreign police organizations in their home countries. And that was actually beyond what I was thinking we would find a couple of years back and a couple of months back at this scale. It's very fascinating and quite a dramatic finding when you know that you can rent out properties in Dubai for as much as several $100,000 a year, apartments or villas.
I'm going to let you folks go, but I got two more quick ones before I ask you to sort of give us what's next. High level, of course, in terms of the project, but privacy issues. Obviously you've got access to information on individuals, passports, that sort of thing. So, obviously you folks deal in that world all the time. But to those of us on the outside, how do you address privacy concerns as you approach this project to make sure, you're doing the work that you set out to do in terms of identifying these issues, but also protecting may be the wrong word, but making sure you're aware of privacy issues of individuals and other reasons why perhaps the information shouldn't be public. Antonio, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, basically that we have, let's say, a threshold, which is public interest. So we establish a line. So if we find a celebrity, if we find a sports star, that is not really public interest. Maybe it has some interest, but we are dealing with private data. I mean, what properties do you have? How much money you have in your bank account? This is extremely private. So we just jump into it. We just explore that, and we just expose that when you have public interest. If you are a public official, if you are somebody close to a public official, close relative of a public official, if you are a criminal, or if you have been investigated, if you're a fugitive, I mean, it must be, basically the line is the public interest.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and John, there's another element to that, and we take a list. So these sorts of things usually get criticized because the allegations, the CIA must be behind this because we didn't write about Americans were there. Actually, there were a lot of Americans there who didn't have. I spent months looking at these people who are ordinary people. A lot of them are of Indian descent. A lot of them are Pakistani descent. Who are doctors, skin cancer specialists, dentists, or oral surgeons. So you can speculate as to why they might have property in Dubai. Maybe they, it's a place where they can meet their relatives from that part of the world. You can also think of nefarious reasons. They're not, they're cash under the table, dodging taxes, but those didn't meet our kind of public interest bar. And in most cases, we didn't even reach out to them. There were some we reached out to, but mostly, simply they weren't public figures. It's not against the law to own property in Dubai. So we were very cautious and not harassing people just because they own property. If that makes sense.
Let me end on Ilov, I'll go to you in a second, but what I want each of you, either question, what's next, and what can our community, my community, the AML, CTF, compliance officials, and what can we take away from this other than the obvious? You've identified some issues that perhaps we knew, as Kevin said, but now we know much more. What can we take away from this as practitioners, or simply what's next high level for the project that you can talk about at this point? So Ilov, I'll start with you and go to Antonio and Kevin.
This type of journalism takes time. So I would expect there will be stories coming out in the future, that are still in work in progress. We started publishing May 14th, and I see every day there are new stories coming out. So I think it's just going to keep coming out. I wanted to just briefly comment on the privacy issue, because there's one thing is what we report on, which Kevin explained very well. And also Antonio has been talking about very well, that there is a high threshold before we publish the names or background of anyone in the leak. But as for property ownership per se, Norway is one of the countries in the world that has an open property registry. We're also one of the countries in the world with the lowest crime rates. Norway is in general a fairly transparent property. We even have open tax records list where you can see the taxable income and wealth of any person and how much they pay in taxes. Still, we are one of the countries with the lowest crime rates. So openness and open property registers do not necessarily facilitate crime. They could do the other way around. I've been reporting on Dubai properties since 2018, I think, from Norway. And during that time, we've been able to see how more and more people list their Dubai properties on their tax records, because we use FOIAs to get the numbers of people who list Dubai properties on their tax statements, tax records to the government. So openness that part of the privacy from a privacy point of view, the data itself is not necessarily kind of a huge issue. It's more who chose to put their money there and for what reasons they did that. And the last comment just on tax, which is a little bit underreported because so far we had a lot of drug huge names from the underworlds of drugs and political figures like Isabel dos Santos and kleptocrats and those type of people. But there's a tax story here that is also very important. Both Italy, UK, and Norway has found that very few owners in total list UAE properties or Dubai properties on their tax declaration, while the number of owners, are huge. And the same goes for income. Very, very few people list income from renting out properties in Dubai while they are global taxpayers to their home country abroad, which means their home countries are losing a lot of revenue, a lot of tax to pay for schools and hospitals and whatever else the welfare state is trying to provide. So that is an aspect that I think is hugely important, and that will be probably reported more on in the future.
Great, thanks. Antonio.
In terms of what could be interesting for the MAL community, I think this after Dubai Unlocked, Dubai real estate sector is a red flag, basically. I think it needs to be considered like a red flag. And for me, is that because it's not like, because the practices that allow that all these criminals from around the globe go there, create an ecosystem which is shady. So if somebody that you are analyzing appears with a surprising activity in real estate in Dubai, well, I think it's something that needs to be taken in account. It doesn't mean necessarily that is a criminal activity, but it's a red flag because the ecosystem is not normal.
I'll put my comment.
Yeah.
My comments would be more in the geopolitical context. So one of the reasons it seems pretty clear that the U.S. is wanting to push Dubai off or UAE off that gray list is because we're trying to give them incentives to help us go after the Russian money, right? So Dubai has not been the most cooperative place in the world in terms of helping track down oligarch money, arms dealers' money. It's become kind of the meeting place for arms trafficking around the world as well. So as an incentive, perhaps, the other factor with Russia and in our geopolitics, but the other factor in geopolitics is the rebuilding of Gaza, which is going to happen. This conflict will, like all conflicts, at some point come to an end, and there's going to be a massive reconstruction. And a lot of that money and a lot of those deals are going to happen in Dubai or through Dubai, and there's going to be a lot of money moving through there. And it wouldn't look great to have a gray listed, questionable country. So as Antonio said, this should be real estate and Dubai in general. I think in the AML world was probably already somewhat a red flag, but now much more so, I think. And the hope is that some of your listeners perhaps will reach out to us. Kevin.hall@occrp.org, Antonio at occrp.org, and I'll let Eilif give his email. I'm sure you'll have it on your website. But in all seriousness, the AML community knows these things and works this, and we all talk to people in that space for this story, and we talk to a range of people in the underworld. Yeah, so there's a lot more that you talk to people who don't end up in the story, as you can imagine. But we always like to hear from people who know more than us because they're the ones in the trenches. So if any of your listeners can point us in a direction, particularly on the enablers, we're always interested.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. I know how busy you are. The occrp.org is the website. Dubai Unlocked is the project. There's many other projects that you've been engaged in as well. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully this exposes what you've been able to do to more folks in the AML community, to Kevin's point, that can do more and perhaps help you with some of the information you're looking for. So thanks again. Really appreciate it. Stay safe, everybody.